Danielle Steele, and certainly not to put down that genre because I read Danielle Steele when I was younger, but there's a lot of themes going on that I sort of intertwine in an entertaining story, because you have to really keep people engaged and reading along while getting these points across. And I didn't want my book to be too preachy. I certainly wanted to celebrate, forgiveness and the need to ask for forgiveness and the sort of renewed relationships. I certainly wanted to express my experience with panic and anxiety disorder, because I knew instinctively that I couldn't have been the only one that ever went through that. And just as a side note, it's very funny because I can't tell you how many people have called me or contacted me and said, oh my God, I can't believe how much I can relate to the character of Madeline. I have panic disorder, or I've had it, or I understand. I understand the fact that, I was raised in a traditional home as well. And not that, I was raised in a very close family and with a good moral foundation, and I'm really happy and grateful for that. But the problem that I had, and that I realized so many other people had as well, was that when you get out into the world, you tend to not, finding people like the people you were raised with becomes more difficult. In Madeline's case, my case, I was raised with three brothers. I have an older sister and three older brothers. And, and a dad who was very upstanding, and not that they were perfect people, but they were good people in all the ways that mattered. And certainly when you get out into the dating world, it's not the same, and I was used to seeing the way my dad and my brothers treated people and treated their girlfriends, and the way my parents treated each other. And when I got out there in the world, it seemed like that was very hard to find. And so a lot of people have gotten back to me and said that as well, because, in that sense, the book is also sort of a commentary on the contemporary dating scene and sort of the trying to bring the values you're raised with out into the world. Still have fun, certainly still want to get out there and have a good time, but certainly keep, without having to compromise your principles. And it gets more and more challenging in the world. There's definitely been a breakdown of respect, especially where dating is concerned. So one thing that really will stand out in the book is that I purposely kind of set up Ken. He's sort of larger than life. Yes, he's based on a real person, but I wanted him to really stand out as the man that really sort of embodied all of the qualities that Maddie really wanted, and she just doesn't realize it the first time around. She sort of takes for granted that there will be others like him. And so after they break up and she goes on and, the book details some of her other dating experiences, which I have to admit are straight out of real life. All the names have been changed. She starts to realize, oh my gosh, this really isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be, even at age 25. So I purposely did that. So a lot of people have said to me after they read the book, well, wow, this guy really sounds too good to be true. And I said, well, not to diminish the real person in any way, because he was wonderful, but I purposely wanted to make a contrast between Ken and the other men that she encounters in the book. So that's definitely something that was deliberate on my part. As I said, it was definitely based on real life, and I'll tell a little story about how it really came about. I did have the title in my head for about 14 years at the time I sat down to write this. And just a little interesting story. For whatever reason, in January of 2008, I had blocked out memories of this person. I had relocated to Florida, only to find out that he really was engaged to another woman. And another theme of my book actually deals with doing the right thing even when it's difficult. So chapter 19 of my book, when Ken knocks on Maddie's door, she's now relocated to Florida, presumably to be with him and hopefully to see if there's a chance for them to make it. He comes knocking on her door, he finally comes clean that his roommate is really his fiance. And even though it's very clear to her, she's getting the idea that this marriage thing, he's not really in love with this woman, and that maybe he's trying to kind of figure out where she stands in all of this, and perhaps if she admits that there's still feelings there, that maybe he'll break off his engagement. She feels very strongly about doing the right thing, and so puts on this big show. It's a very dramatic chapter, and it is, I'll be honest with you, it is pretty much the way it is written, it's the way it played out in real life, but I feel very strongly that I pretended, when this gentleman asked me outright, well, how does this make you feel? And I pretended that I thought it was the greatest thing that's ever happened, and congratulations, and I was very, very receptive to it, I guess. And so it was only after Ken, in the chapter 19, it's only after Ken leaves that Maddie has this breakdown. And what ended up happening, though, in real life, was that I kind of buried all that pain and all that hurt, and I never told anyone about what had happened. So I was afraid maybe my family would disapprove and would say, I told you so, you shouldn't have moved there, which they wouldn't have done. but you're going through all of these emotions, and I thought, well, you know what, maybe his purpose in my life is just to get me to make some changes. Maybe just to get me to a place where I could make it on my own, and as proud as I am of my family, I have a very accomplished family, maybe kind of make it on my own as Daria, not, Daria, son of Dr. DiGiova, or sister of Carolyn, or, Paul's little sister, but maybe, start off in a place where nobody really knew me and kind of find my own way. And it has been wonderful in that regard, and I've made a lot of great friendships and relationships, and it's been great. So, but for whatever reason, but I buried all of this. So fast forward to 2008, I had gotten to the point where this guy never even existed, and that tells you how powerful the mind can be and the emotions. And by the way, panic and anxiety disorder is a problem with the emotions, not the mind. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, someone told me that, and it made me feel so much better because I really do think I was losing my mind when it was at its worst. But it was only in January of that year that all of a sudden, I don't know why, but all these memories just came flooding back to me, and I didn't know, it was just sort of like somebody opened the floodgates, and everything came back to me about him, about what had happened. And as crazy as it sounds, I had gotten myself to the point where if somebody would say to me, well, why did you move to Florida? I would say, well, I just got tired of the winter, and I just really wanted to change, and all of which was true. But I mean, really, the catalyst for me to pick up my life and move 1,200 miles from home had started with this particular guy. And to get myself to the point where I literally forgot he existed is an amazing thing to me now when I think of it. So when all these memories came back to me, I thought, maybe this would really make a good story. And I had successfully overcome the panic disorder by then, and a few other things, and I thought, wow, you know what? Writing really is therapy, and so I'm going to sort of fictionalize the story and sort of create these characters and actually create it in a way where I can then leave the door open for sequel and to go back in time and write prequels, because the Rose family in the book is based on my family in real life. So I'm planning on taking chunks of time in the future, maybe going back in time and sort of emphasizing some of these themes of as I just mentioned, of faith in God and personal relationships and hard work and personal responsibility, and sort of tying them into some other family stories. But fortunately for me, I've also been a keeper of journals for the past 20 years. So I pulled those out to sort of help me fill in some of the details. Even though I had remembered so much of what had happened, I pulled them out to help me remember specific things. For example, in chapter 1, Ken actually buys a rose for Maddie's friend Carmen when they're at this nightclub dancing, and the rose has a little red devil on it, and that is straight out of real life. And I would never have remembered that if I hadn't written it down in my journal. I mean, something silly, but it sort of adds a little fun element to the story. The only difficult part with writing this book, and I just want to say I'd never written a novel before in my life, even though I said it was something I always wanted to do. I've done content writing, copywriting, more like business writing, articles, human interest stories, but I had never actually sat down and written a novel. And I don't know what it was divine timing, or there was an angel on my shoulder or something, but I was working a full-time position with Franklin Templeton at the time. And I sat down in, I would say, March of that year, 2008, and I just started writing. And whenever I wasn't working, I was writing. I mean, 4 or 5 hours a night, all weekend long, and the time would just fly by. And it was almost like this book was just meant to be. And I never had to think about where to use narration, where to use dialogue, where to end the chapters. They just sort of naturally evolved. I mean, my chapters ended up being about 20 pages. And I never sat down and consciously said, okay, I'm going to make those 20 pages. Here's how I'm going to lay it out. I'm going to divide it into part 1 and part 2. But it just sort of naturally evolved. And it was an amazing experience. And so I hope that